Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this live panel session. I'm Esther Martinez. I'm the CEO and Editor-in-Chief at People Matters, and I'm going to be your host for today. I'm extremely excited to welcome you all for a topic that I believe is going to be very, very interesting, and it's going to be the foundation for a lot of our planning probably as we start the new year. So, self leadership is one of the higher cognitive skills that experts believe will be in high demand in the workplace of the future. In fact, from a global study from McKinsey points out that the value of self leadership in the evolution of work, specifically professionals who opt to sharpen their skills by engaging with continuous education, tend to be better prepared for disruptions at work. And we've seen multiple of them, and we continue to see that accelerating as well. So, continue with our endeavor to provide actionable insights to our community. People Matters is privileged to partner with upGrad for business and insights, presenting this exclusive session, which is going to set the context for how self-leadership and self-awareness can really drive organizational transformation. So very excited to welcome our panelists for today, and we have a very diverse and experienced panelists. We have Mukvinder Singh Bains from the India Learning and Leadership Development Lead at Accenture. Mukvinder, a very good afternoon, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning to you and everyone.
Welcome to the discussion. Mukvinder brings a lot of experience in learning and development, of course, with a demonstrated history of working with information technology and service industries. Very warm welcome once again. Joining, we also have Manavi Patak, Head of Talent and Leadership and OD at Tata Trend. Very warm welcome, Manavi.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Manavi brings over 20 years experience in HR consulting, academics, and COE roles as well. So thank you for joining us to this discussion. We have the privilege to have as well Pravir Jha, founder and CEO of Pravir Jha People Advisory. Very warm welcome, Pravir.
Hi, Esther. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and thank you for being with us. Pravir is one of India's most influential HR leaders and needs no introductions for many of us, and leader who has been credited with the success of a lot of transformation and impactful initiatives at both Tata Motors and Reliance. So very warm welcome, Pravir. We have Meenakshi Indra, President upGrad for Business. Very warm welcome, Meenakshi.
Thanks, Esther, and I'm looking forward to a powerful panel with my panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Meenakshi, for joining us. Meenakshi brings a lot of experience as in organizations like IBM, Cisco, SAP, LinkedIn, and Uber, and now leading the partnership with customers in the upGrad for Business. So thank you so much for joining, Meenakshi. And we have the privilege to have as well Tanya Boyd, Learning Architect for Insights. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us so late in the night, in your time zone, Tanya.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tanya. Tanya is a PhD in industry organizational psychology and has worked extensively with internal and external customers as well as university instructor. So very warm welcome, all of you. We have a huge agenda to cover, and I'm going to invite our audience today to keep bringing questions, because I think that's the beauty of doing a session live. And I want to thank you all for taking time to be together in this session live. So we're going to be taking questions from the audience as we go along. So feel free to keep sending your questions as we go through the conversation. All right, so let's start. I'm going to invite, with your permission, I'm going to invite Meenakshi and Tanya to do a quick context setting when we're talking about this whole focus on self-leadership and self-awareness, and how is it connecting with organizational transformation. Inviting both of you to just quickly set up the context before we start with the panel discussion. Over to you, Meenakshi and Tanya.
Thanks for that, Esther, and what a critical topic in today's day and time. Esther, as I respond to it, it's important for us to acknowledge that we find ourselves in one of the most challenging times, and that's true for the global workforce. All of us observed that employees and companies had to pivot almost overnight in response to the global pandemic. Businesses had to go virtual to keep their operations going, and that meant going digital. This impacted how people worked, where they worked, and what skills they required for the same. With disruptive technologies changing business models overnight, the only way to sustain growth was continuous upskilling and reskilling of employees in preparation for this ambiguous future. From an employee perspective, even with the advent of Industry 5.0 clubbed with the pandemic, new job roles were getting created at a pace that was unprecedented in the past. At the same time, there was fear of job or role redundancy. How could they stay relevant at all times? What organization should they be a part of? What skills do they need to stay ahead of the curve? I read a recent PwC survey which highlighted that a massive 77% of the workforce said that they are ready to learn new skills or completely retrain themselves. In my mind, this is where self leadership lends itself, reaching out, taking charge, and having a growth mindset around the changes that happen around each one of us. When we talk to companies and we hear an employer's perspective, it's critical that they over index on this as well, because self leadership benefits the organization as a whole. It enables a manager or a leader to influence others to take action so that the goals of the organization are met. And what we've observed in our conversations is that it has four pronged benefits for them. One, it builds an efficient and productive workforce that is self driven, self empowered. Second, it leads to elevated motivation levels and higher accountability within teams. Third, it builds trusted relationships within the workforce and externally as well. And last but not the least, it delivers stronger performances for organizations on the matrix that they measure. I'm looking forward to delving deeper on it with the panel and addressing questions. I will pass it on to Tanya for her to share her perspective as well.
Thank you very much. And I really agree with everything that you said there, Meenakshi, about self-leadership and the importance of for today, for the world that we're living in at the moment. And I just wanted to comment on something that I would consider to be a prerequisite for self-leadership, and that is the concept of awareness. And you'll probably hear about awareness from each of our panelists today in different ways, but I just wanted to give a few definitions to set that context. Sometimes when we hear awareness, it's considered to be a soft skill. That's a term we hear a lot. And there are some people who might say that those soft skills are maybe less important than what might be defined as hard skills. However, I believe that awareness is an unlocker of performance for individuals and for organizations. Simon Sinek has referred to soft skills as people skills, but I would go even farther and call awareness actually a power skill because of its power to unlock or impact performance. And another piece of awareness, when most people hear the term awareness, they think about self-awareness. And certainly self-awareness is an important component of that overall concept of awareness, but there are some other types of awareness that I think are also important for supporting this concept of self-leadership that we're exploring today. And I've done some research around it, and actually 4 types of awareness emerged from the conversations and surveys that I've done. Self-awareness, certainly, and that included both people's own internal awareness of their strengths and challenges and skills and even hopes and dreams, but also external or input or feedback from other people. How do they perceive us? That's an important part of self-awareness. So that's one piece. Another piece is what I'm calling other awareness. So awareness of other people's hopes, dreams, skills, opportunities there. And how can we be aware of what other people need and what can we do to support them? Then the third type of awareness is situational awareness. So that refers to awareness of your present situation. And this could be something very tangible and specific, like awareness of a safety issue that's going on right in the moment. Or it could be broader, so that it's awareness of maybe a team challenge or an organizational challenge, or what we're all experiencing now, the situation of a global pandemic, just what's going on in the world. So that's a third kind of awareness that's not about a person, but just about the situation. And then the fourth type of awareness is awareness of alternative futures. And what that means is just being aware that the future is uncertain and likely to change. So whatever plan we make today for our own upskilling, our own career paths, we need to be actively aware that a different future may emerge and we might need to amend our plan. So having that awareness actually keeps us agile as individuals in that way. So if you imagine a person who's self-leading in this self-leadership space, that person will have activated all 4 types of awareness that I talked about there. And imagine the powerful positive impact for that individual and for the organizations they work with if they're operating with those awarenesses active. So a person who has those active will be leading their own personal development, their own career path, as well as seeking to activate awareness in any people who might report to them if they happen to be people leaders as well. So they'll be looking for skills to develop that are really relevant for their current situation, but they'll also be agile and ready to change course as that future unfolds. So then imagine an organization where every person is operating that way. And of course, that would be a very efficient and effective organization. And the alternative is people who might wait for others to tell them what knowledge and skills to develop, and then just follow kind of a prescribed curriculum or pathway that's maybe not taking into account what they already know or what skills are most essential for them. So I would just say that self-leadership is absolutely a differentiator for individuals and for organizations. And this concept of awareness is really an essential component, and we'll get to explore that today. So thank you, Esther.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanya and Minavi, Meenakshi, both for bringing the importance of self-leadership at the individual and organizational level. Tanya, for going deeper into one of the very big components of that self-leadership, which is the 4 elements of awareness and how this becomes a differentiator and a foundation. So let's hear from our panelists in terms of how do they see self-leadership critical. And I think that was probably critical even before the pandemic, because what both of you are speaking about are fundamental components of really what we want to see in our workforce, but even more important probably at this time in the post-pandemic. So Mukhvinder, Manavi, Pravir, we'd love to hear your viewpoints about why do you think this is more critical, what we're hearing from Meenakshi and Tanya. Why is this more critical today than ever before?
Any particular order? Go ahead, Manavi.
Manavi, and then maybe Pravir, I come to you, and then Mukhvinder, you can
Sure.
follow. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. And, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So, both Meenakshi and Tanya, they spoke about, the work environment and, self-awareness. All these concepts are very, very important. So, when you ask me that what is self-awareness, self-leadership in the context of, modern workplace, and so let us understand what the modern workplace looks like. See, today's work environment is actually characterized by high degree of volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and unpredictability or complexity. And it was predicted that there will be elimination of jobs and there will be fundamental changes in the skill requirements. All this has already been said, and now it has all the more been fueled by the pandemic. The World Economic Forum report, similar to what Meenakshi mentioned about the PwC report, they also spoke about that how half of the global workforce is going to require major reskilling and upskilling by 2025. So there's a reskilling emergency which has come up. And furthermore, traditional employment, that is, a stable full-time employment, working with a single organization, is now going away and giving way to gig workers or gig work. Okay, so all this is actually creating a lot of changes and uncertainty, and it is actually shifting the responsibility of career management from the organization to the individual. Okay, and these changes, as I said, are likely to result in a lot of job or occupational insecurity, especially if people are left to handle them on their own and if they are unprepared to handle them. So the concept of self leadership comes very handy here, and self leadership is not a new concept, as already mentioned. It is basically means that you take ownership and you take an active part in influencing yourself to achieve your personal and professional goals. So it is about leading yourself before you lead others. And it may sound very simple, but very few people are able to truly hold themselves to this kind of leadership. And in the ever changing environment where typical habits, behaviors, and thinking are not enough. It is the self leadership which will help us navigate through all this crisis. I will not take very long because other panelists are also there, but I would just like to add one more thing: is that there are few elements of self leadership which we'll touch upon later, and which is, one is growth mindset, second is continuous learning, the third is being very agile and self aware. So these are few things which will help us navigating in this challenging times. Thank you.
I'm so
You're on
sorry.
mute. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you so much. Thanks, Manavi. And I was inviting Prabir you to come in. I
Yeah.
think you're an example of continuous learning, growth mindset, and an agile leader for many of us. Tell us, why is this more critical than ever before?
No, I think the context is so beautifully explained and said by all the three ladies. So let me just step back and remind ourselves, and stealing some thoughts from what I've heard, whether it's the VUCA reality. I believe we live in a world of huge risks and immense opportunity. The question is, are people willing to see the risks, and are people willing to notice the opportunities? And that's a big problem. Irrespective of sector, space, industry, I think the disruption is everywhere. It's very discontinuous. And to that extent, even the talent mix, the talent demographics, the talent behaviors, the spatial distribution, I think that Meenakshi talked about, the all of that becomes very, very critical. And it is on a scale which is unprecedented. But to me, the operating word is risk and opportunity. And to me, business is all about risk and opportunity. If you're smart enough to kind of smell right, sniff right, you can do both things better. The other thing, and that's where I think the relevance of self leadership becomes, Esther, very critical, is I believe leadership is all about influence. There is nothing more complex about leadership. It's about influence. If you can't influence, it doesn't matter what your title is, how many years of experience. To me, it's a lot of bull. If you're able to influence, and I think Tanya said it so beautifully, you can influence only when you need the context and circumstance of influence, because each person chooses to get influenced depending on how smart and intelligent you are about picking up the cues, either of the future, about the context, about yourself, about others. But I very strongly believe that unless individual mindsets change, the collective mindset will never think or behave different. It's a very important line. We can't wait for, which is historical. Transparency is easy, but ownership is very tough. And therefore, self-awareness, self-leadership is about influencing oneself, understanding oneself, the willingness to understand oneself, which is, I guess, the subject we'll discuss today. It's a lot to do with intentionality, with positive intent, resolve. How will you influence your own thinking, feeling, behaving, acting is the way you will earn the ticket to ride, to influence others to think, feel, and behave differently. And that is why you still can then hope to be relevant and impactful even as the world continues to disrupt itself. And that's why it's so critical today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prabir. And taking from Manavi that said, lead self before you lead others, and Prabir, you adding that element about being able to see the risk and opportunity from the context perspective. It starts with that individual, intentional resolve, need to change and to see that awareness that Tanya was talking about, and then moving that to the collective. Fantastic. Movinder, difficult to go after Manavi and Prabir, because most of it has been covered, but please go ahead.
Absolutely. And as I said, most of it's been covered, but let me just kind of take a step back. Accenture is about 200,000 people in India. Yeah, it's almost like a small town or a city per se. Just getting, it's just not getting, 50, 20 leaders getting together and moving in one direction, but it is taking the whole city in one particular direction. And that's a tough one. And in last about 18 months or so, since the whole COVID scenario came in, everyone is sitting at home, which nobody was used to. Some of our young supervisors had no clue how to manage individuals who were sitting at home where there was no connect. We were hiring like nobody's business. The new set of people had not even seen what an Accenture building looks like. And therefore, the expectation was that they not only will be able to come and do work at the same level as what the existing folks are doing, but at the same time, they'll understand the culture and they'll understand the ethos, they'll understand how the function needs to happen, and still not having a clue other than probably sitting in front of a screen. Yeah, I think that is what, the leaders, and in our case, the first thing was, and while I'm hearing everyone talk about, every individual needs to be there, but our was, how do we get our leaders to start understanding that first? And that was our biggest challenge, on getting our leaders to start understanding that. Sure, first and foremost, go back and take care of yourselves. Go back and look at yourselves. Unless and until you yourselves are not taking care of self and families, however will you go back and look at anybody else? And I think that was, and of course, fortunately for us, we started some of these journeys much before pandemic, and therefore it just kind of helped us accelerate the whole piece, and therefore we were able to move much faster. But I think that is where something significantly changed. I think the other thing that also in the first quarter, which is April, May, June, what we saw was suddenly a huge jump in learning. Everyone is at home, suddenly people had more time at hand, and therefore there was a jump in learning. And how do we ensure that they were getting to learn the right things? And I heard Prabir, Manvi, all of you talk about getting the right skills, getting people to be ready on their own, and self-learning. I think that became extremely important for us while they were learning. But were we helping them move in the right direction, and ensuring that they understood what was important to them? Rather than pushing down learning, how do you ensure that you give them enough, and what was available, let them go back and pick again? And I know somebody mentioned about that. That was what was significant. Moving away from, still, even though we've talked about being virtual, we've talked about self-learning, we've talked about all of those before pandemic also, but there was still a significant portion that was in person, in classroom, in the touch and feel, the meeting up, the relationships, all of that. And how do you still build relationships in this particular scenario? I think that was our biggest challenge, and therefore we started working. And I'll talk about some of the things that we did. Whether it was around the mindfulness, we launched a program called Truly Human, which was heart, mind, body, and soul. How do you take care of some of those things? I think that was for us a big transition. During these last 18 months, and of course, things have evolved as we move forward.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mukhvinder. And I'm going to take on your cue about upskilling and preparing for the future, and how self-leadership really connects with that. And I'm going to invite Meenakshi and Tanya. And Meenakshi, you were saying in the beginning about how we move from that fear to the need to invest and really move towards being ready and be more versatile, more employable, more impactful to the business. And you mentioned that before. And now Mukhvinder is connecting that with how learning went up, the need for learning became more important than ever before. How does self-leadership and professionals that embrace self-leadership as a foundation, how does that connect with their readiness to upskill themselves, prepare for the future? Meenakshi and Tanya, we'd love to hear from you on that.
Sure. So I'll go first. Tanya, thanks for this very Esther, and so front and center for all of us. I've been listening in with rapt attention. Manavi and Prabir spoke about influence, the influence first of your own self, your teams, and to the business. And Mukhvinder so beautifully kind of put it in concept of a self-leadership, self-awareness, and the work that Accenture is doing as well. Esther, the way that I look at this is self-leadership is really core to the VUCA world that we've all been talking about. There's so much of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that goes along with it. Employees today are expected to be decision drivers, change makers within their organizations. There is so much more reliance on them, and self-leadership actually enables this. I would equate this with a higher sense of accountability, ownership that employees have, which aligns with their organizational purpose. These employees are usually more aware, and they take charge of situations irrespective of whether it's expected from them, irrespective of whether it's a part of their job role or a function or not. These employees then get seen as problem solvers and are valued more than others within their respective organizations. This actually is a multiplier effect, and it acts as a catalyst for their own professional growth. It helps instill a culture of collaboration in the professional circle that they play in, and all round it then enables growth for that organization, for their team, for their business. and eventually the country as well. Today, we hear professionals and companies alike. Over the last 18 months, we've had a lot of these conversations with companies and professionals, and they speak to us about industry and domain specific expertise that's really helping them. And when they talk about this, I heard Mukhinder speak about this as well. It's not just the learning part of it, but it's also the application part of it within their current roles, within the future roles that they aspire to be at. Within upgrad, we are strong advocates for this, and this to my mind is a sub element of self-awareness, which then translates into self-leadership. It is critical for business leaders, even more than our workforce, because they are expected to lead. And we know that uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, the buck stops with them. Self aware leaders then bring a culture of strong performance. They surround themselves with diverse voices. They value disruption in their organization, which leads to innovative thinking. Upskilling their teams and being lifelong learners is a step in my mind in that direction. Whether it is leveraging behavioral tools, I loved how Tanya called them power skills, can help quantify the existing skills in the areas of attention as a way for going forward for any organization or any employee for that matter. To sum it up, employees are in charge, and the organizations have the role of being enablers of this. It is up to the employees to dictate and decide their path, and companies will facilitate elevation of this. You're on mute, Esther.
Just forgetting to unmute myself of the time. So sorry. Thank you, Meenakshi and Tanya. We'd love to hear from you before we move to the next section, please.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. It's. I think Meenakshi and I are quite aligned. So I'm just going to add a little bit more from my perspective of this activating awareness and really the role of awareness here. And I would say that professionals who are self-aware, and thinking back to what I defined awareness as, if they're aware of the strengths that they have, if they're aware of the strengths and needs of those around them as well, if they're aware of the situation that they're in right at the moment and what that situation is asking of them, what their team is going through, their organization is operating, what context their organization is operating in, and aware of that emerging future path and that it's likely going to change. When professionals are aware of that, then they're actually in a good position to know what skills and knowledge and experiences they should upskill in right now. And they can then target their upskilling and make it much more efficient and effective. They'll be able to be very agile and ready to adjust and change focus if it's needed. And this is, again, I contrasted this a little bit in the intro as well, but just to lay it out there again as a contrast, the alternative, and often we do still find some of these where there's kind of a one-size-fits-all training program, and you become a leader or you enter a field, and so you go on this training program from start to finish. But people go on those programs because they're told to, but the programs don't necessarily take into account the personalization that would really make them more effective. If we can take into account people's previous knowledge, where do they come in to that journey? Maybe they're at the beginning, but maybe they're partway through. Maybe they're ready. They just need one piece of it to really take them to that next level. So when we have self-leadership or individuals who are self-leading through their awareness, they're able to really choose their upskilling and choose the approach that fits them and their situation. And that makes it very efficient. We need to be efficient right now in the world. But actually everybody's alluded to the changing world. The organizations are changing. The world is changing so fast that self-leadership is really essential for both an individual and organizations to be able to keep pace. Because if we wait for somebody to tell us what to do, it's too late, right? Things have already changed. But if you have individuals that are actively looking for what do they need in this moment and where is their future unfolding in this next moment, and they're able to adjust and look for those skills they need right now, that's what is necessary to help organizations really keep pace with whatever knowledge and skills are necessary to succeed. So that would be my addition to that one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanya. And everything starts really interconnecting when we talk about ownership and accountability, not just about the outcomes and the impacts and results, but really about what do I need as an individual in terms of my skills. And both of you alluded on how it can be so contextually relevant for that individual when he or she is the one actually leading that career path, as opposed to a centralized way to say, well, this is what you need. Because when that 4 layers of awareness that you spoke about, then I am actually a lot more intentional, as Prabir was saying, and resolved to take that forward. So I'm going to pick up on Prabir's point. You were talking about risk and opportunity as one of the core concepts and elements on business. And I'm going to invite Mukhvinder first and then Manavi to talk about how this self-leadership then leads to individuals having more opportunity or more clarity on decision making, driving innovation. And really that's what, in my view, Prabir was referring to in terms of being able to see which risks I need to looking at that are going to be dangerous for my team, my organization, what opportunities are out there. And that's something we'd love to hear from both of you. How does self-leadership connect to my ability to decide what's best for the organization, my ability to drive innovation?
Sure,
ahead,
and let me start there. So I think, and we've talked about what self-awareness is all about and what self-leadership is all about. I think the important part is for each of us as individuals, and whether we are leaders or whether we look at ourselves as individuals who still have leaders on top who are helping kind of put a direction, is to understand what is important to me and what is my direction and what is it that I want to do in the long term. And the advantage today is, unlike when we were younger, we didn't know where to go to, and all you had was 2 or 3 different things you could opt for. Today the kids, and I'm going to call them kids, just looking at my gray hair, they have the opportunity to explore much more. There are opportunities much more, and unless and until that individual can't understand what are the right skills that he or she has, and therefore what would be the right path that could and what is it that they want to do, I think that is what is going to help them understand which path they want to go to. As leaders, it's important for us to understand what are the opportunities that are available, what are the opportunities that could be available 2 years, 3 years down the line, and therefore how as a firm, how are we as an organization, as leaders, kind of preparing for those 3 years down the line and 5 years down the line, and therefore guiding our workforce to move in that similar direction. A lot of times the challenges come in, when we almost wear blinkers and we don't look, left and right, and we kind of focus on just one area. It is important for us as organizations and leaders to go back and look at much more, the length and the breadth of what is available and what is possible, and also go back and handhold our people to be able to walk that particular path, and I think that is much more important. And each one of us who's been in learning, and we understand there could be multiple careers within learning itself, right from content development to, the whole design part of it, to actually delivery part of it, to be managing the learning. And as a leader, one needs to understand what are the skills that team members have, and also what is it that is their aspiration, and we build that. And that is the self-awareness which will have to come across the levels, and therefore at individuals to see, this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do, and therefore also guide them. I don't think there is a time now of saying this is the only thing that you should be doing because I'm telling you that's the right thing to do. I think it's important to kind of go back to the users, learners, employees, and say, here are the things that are available. We believe, based on your skills, based on your strengths, these are the right directions for you to go in. Go figure it out for yourself. Go start with, here are the learning paths available where you can go back and start exploring and see what interests you, and come back and tell me, and I will ensure that I guide you in similar direction. I think in my opinion, self-awareness, self-leadership is also, bringing all of those pieces together for our teams, and not just for self, or, and if you can do that for self, team, then organization also follows the right direction. That's how I will look at it.
Thank you so much, Pavlinder. And before I come to you, Prabir, and there's some questions about how can we practically nurture that self-leadership, and there are questions already from the audience on that, and we'd love to hear your view. But Manavi, anything to add on how does self-leadership connects with the ability to decide, to the ability to drive innovation? Anything else to add on Movinder's point?
Yeah, and, I think we I think Mukhinder has already spoken, and Meenakshi also spoke about it. So self leadership, for a layman might sound like something very individual centric, or very very selfish, but it's not like that. When you practice self leadership, it will have its ripple effects across the organization. And Meenakshi spoke about this multiplier effect, when she spoke about the impact that it happens at team level or leadership level. So what happens is that there's several benefits when you do self leadership. For example, it could be increased productivity, okay, or it could be creating a team of leaders, or increasing accountability. So when you have all these things going in place, it will definitely impact the culture of the organization, and it will help the organization grow, and this will actually lead to benefits for the individual as well as the organization in the long run. So this is just I wanted to add that. Thanks.
Esther, you're on mute.
Apologies. So sorry. I'm muting myself because I'm taking notes as you speak, and I don't want the audience to hear the click, 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 click. But then it has its down effects. So I need to be a lot more aware, Tanya. So don't know which level of awareness it is. But anyway, Pravir, help us understand what are some of the practical reflections or aspects for us as HR professionals, L&D professionals, to be able to really facilitate that self-awareness, the development of that self-awareness.
So, I think as HR or L&D, we can handhold, but I'll take a little wider swipe and look at it. What can organizations do? Because, the irony or the challenge, Esther, that I have observed over all these years, and even today I see, we've, as leaders in this space, we are all talking the right things. It's very intuitive. It's not rocket science. We're not designing space shuttles and NASA rockets here, right? But yet companies don't do. So the more strategic question is, something which seems so intuitive does get practiced more in the breach than in the observance. And that is the challenge that we have. It's not that, it sounds very simple. So, I can think of 5 things that organizations should do. Again, intuitive, but I'll be honest, even best companies don't do enough of it, at least not in combination. So I'll just list 5. So those on the call or watching us, can see whether it relates with them or their organizational context. First, and I've written a lot about this, both sociological safety and psychological safety. Psychological safety breeds and builds itself on sociological safety, which is the demographic mix of an organization. I think there is too much of conformism, unsaid maybe, role model, the leaders, I did it this way, this is the only way. And I heard some of the panelists talk about allowing self-leadership to find their space. I'll be very honest, most companies don't do it. Even very, very marquee companies don't do a good job of that, because everyone hires for culture fit. And I'm a very strong advocate, and I keep screaming that hire for culture plus, don't hire for goddamn culture fit. Everyone thinks the same way, behaves the same way, and then you say, think about self-awareness and self-leadership. Not happening. And that is where I think HR and learning teams also need to demonstrate more courage, the ability to influence, which is in short supply. So that I think is important, building sociological and therefore psychological safety. Then only people are willing to kind of reflect. Otherwise, we are all wearing masks. So unless you unpeel the mask, how will you ever get into the business of self-awareness and self-leadership? So it's a big effort. Forget all the big jargons that we might use in companies, but the honest reality is work on this. Second suggestion, make coaching a way of life. Coaching also breeds reflection for the coach. Why should it be an external coach? Why should manager manage and the team relationship not that be of a coach coaching? And self-awareness, self-leadership will breed on also asking for feedback from the coachee. Unfortunately, coaching is seen as a very distinct. I mean, I know people invite me and say, my CEO needs a coach, the CXOs need a coach. After 20 years, you need Pravir to come and, say abracadabra and, the guy is different. Sorry. coaching starts from day one. You don't invest in people. And particularly in this part of the world, it's worse because culturally we still are hierarchical. We may be using first names, but the culture is hierarchical, and boards down, people have to take ownership for not doing a good job. And no HR guy talks about this because they like to save their jobs, which is part of the other problem. So make coaching a way of life. And therefore, inherent in that, the culture of 360-degree feedback, becoming more self-aware, the issue of blind spots, all of that builds in. And then, you may not agree at that time, but as you think about it, each person can say, well, let me try and get different. Not very difficult, but it has to happen. Third, I believe companies need to celebrate failures and even incremental improvements far more than they do. The pressure on getting it right each time and every time, the pressure to window dress quarterly results is so intense. Companies have no elbow room to make efforts to innovate, to try and do things differently, fail, because that will be held against me at the time of reckoning. There is no question of self-awareness and self-leadership happening if people are not allowed to fail. It's okay to fail. Everyone wants to look up and put the monkey on someone else's shoulder, say it's not on my goal sheet, I won't do it. Very, very intuitive, doesn't happen in companies. This is my advisory experience of the last 2.5 years. Very simple, but we don't do. Fourth, trust and vulnerability. If you are not willing to be vulnerable with your teams, with your peers, there is no way trust is going to get built. You may do workshops, offsites, nothing is going to change. Vulnerability has to be visible from the top guy down. It doesn't happen. Typically, everyone wants to be that big, macho kind of a man. And therefore, trust levels in most organizations are very suspect. Very, very suspect. And last, therefore, your entire storytelling mix must actually somewhere reinforce all that my distinguished panelists have been saying. There are examples, but where are those stories getting heard? We are all doing so-called dress the bride up stories, from campus to internal communications, all dress the bride up stories. There is no authenticity in companies. And so 5 simple things, but it needs a lot of grit, courage, and resolve from the boards down to be able to make a change. Otherwise, we can keep talking till the cows come home. Nothing is going to change in corporations.
Thank you. Thanks, Prabir, for sharing these 5 reflections. And I think you were saying simple things are always the most complex. And as I hear you, I do so agree with you and resonate about how hard the simple things really are, not just to get started, but most importantly, to sustain them with that intentional and resolve that you were speaking about. So thank you so much for sharing those 5 elements. And I'm going to invite, we now have around 16, 17 minutes to go, and I can see lots of questions from the audience, and I want to make sure we have time for those. So I'm going to prioritize, with your permission, some few questions that we haven't yet covered. So Meenakshi and Tanya, if I can invite you to quickly talk about some of the core skills. When we talked about the self-leadership and awareness as a foundation, and we spoke about how it connects with learning and skilling. But what would be some of those core skills you can see? You have the opportunity to work with global organizations and support them as they go through that journey of being more effective, more innovation, more innovative, more agile. What are some of those core skills that you see?
Sure. So Esther, as we get running into this, I think it's coming across very beautifully in terms of what we're hearing from the rest of our panelists as well. So when we look at the way that we approach the market, we speak about wholesome talent development, which is focusing not just on the technical or data skills that build competency, but also on the softer skills that show us how to leverage these technical skills to bring the best out of our employees. At upGrad for Business, we call it the trifecta of mindset, skill set, and tool set. Mindset here refers to the organizational mindset or the guiding principles that propel the company forward. Skill sets are the obvious skills that are needed to deliver on the mindset, and tool sets really are the biteable pieces for consumption of the employees that en masse then work together towards the organizational goals, circling it off to organizational mindset. We find ourselves running towards Industry 5.0. It's really about rehumanizing technology, ensuring industry-centric learning, depending on the industry, whether it is BFSI, healthcare, pharma, or retail. the curriculum relevant for one industry might not be best suited for the other. Hence, it's important to build those organization wide programs according to what skill sets or tool sets will be required by the workforce and the mindset that will help us move towards this industry 5.0. When I speak from the perspective of companies, corporate offerings need to include programs which are focused on developing this mindset through softer skills, behavioral skills, along with the hard skills, which could be under data or emerging technologies. If I really have to pick a few of the core skills, we are hearing companies talk about developing grit, resilience, learning agility, creativity, innovation, problem solving, and critical thinking. I completely resonate with Prabir just a few minutes back as he mentioned the 5 pointers. And I'll fixate on coaching for a moment. A strong step in developing this organizational core muscle or skill is bringing coaching as a way of life for all employees. And all, I don't mean it for leaders or middle management, for all employees at all levels. It could manifest itself as wellness coaching, performance coaching, leadership coaching. As an organization, we have been at the helm of leading these conversations with companies, and I would add the fourth element of industry or domain level coaching as you look at it. To summarize, the future of workforce is one where the humans coexist with the machines, and the best of both are being utilized for the greater good of companies, societies, and if I can be a bit idealistic, the world itself. This will be delivered through the blended human assisted learning journey that includes coaching. And by doing this, we will take care of the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Meenakshi. Tanya, anything to add before I move to the next question? Please?
Yes. Yes, actually, I'd just like to put a little bit of extra emphasis even on some of those domain specific skills. So Meenakshi talked about the kind of general skills that can help everybody. I also think it's really important to invest in domain specific upskilling and really supporting individuals to be true experts in their field and to own, to take accountability for maintaining that expertise as their field changes. That's what I think self-leadership can help with. It plays an important role because it's those individuals, the current experts in a field, who are actually best placed to know where is that field going, what skills and knowledge are emerging. Organizations really shouldn't try to control all the learning, but instead really seek to support self-leadership, encouraging individuals to build their own expertise. And then with those domain-specific experts, if you have the skills like collaboration and teamwork, that really enables the experts in the fields to come together and share their expertise in ways that then lead to innovation and breakthroughs. So just wanted to add that in there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanya. And with your permission, I'm jumping into the audience questions because we have lots of them. And I know we had plan and prepare some additional questions, but I think we need to give priority to our audience today. So I'm going to start with Kanika's question, and Mukbinder and Manabi, I'm bringing that it for you. So Kanika's question is, how can L&D leaders promote the culture of self-leadership, especially in the context of many of our employees being remote or being hybrid, with this whole challenge of digital fatigue? How do we really promote this self-leadership in a context where we don't even have a physical space that it's common in most of the cases? So what will be some of your recommendations at both Accenture or Tata Trend on how are you doing that? How are you promoting that culture of self-leadership?
Okay, I'd like to
Go
start.
ahead, Manavi. Go ahead.
So there are a lot of things, when you talk about, and it is more or less uh, uh, something to do with the learning culture of the organization. Okay, so when you, of course, we have moved from a classroom setup to a digital learning, online learning, but there are few things which will not change. And I always tell this to people, like we've had these discussions internally in the organization, and it goes down to that, if you are not willing to learn, no one can help you, but if you're determined to learn, no one can stop you. So the learning methodology would have changed, but it is the culture of the organization, how you are getting into learning, how do you celebrate learning, how do you encourage learning, that it becomes extremely important. Few things at the individual level that I'd like to touch on is that, again, I mentioned about growth mindset. You have to have some kind of a growth mindset. You have to be a continuous learner. You have to be very keen and eager to learn. You have to have a learning strategy in place, even if you are your organization might be doing some things. But if you are, when we are talking about self leadership, it is owning your learning strategy and owning your learning plan that you want to do, and rest of it is going to fall in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manavi. Bhupender, anything to add from the organizational perspective to really create that context for people
Yeah.
to be able to flourish in the self-leadership perspective?
Sure. And if I could just add one point before that is, from what Prabir was saying about the 5 things, I think there's one more, and I know Tanya mentioned that it is the whole collaboration, shared success that is extremely important. Unless and until we, as a firm and in a firm like ours, which is large, it becomes that much more critical because you're different silos, different teams, different groups that are working. Unless and until as a leaders you don't come together and say, it is a shared success that we are looking at, that does not percolate down to your last team member. Because if as leaders you're all going for in isolation and you're focusing on your success and don't care about everybody else, then as a firm that means you're only working in silos and not together. And therefore the shared success model, the collaboration piece, we did something which was called leadership DNA, and a lot of things Prabir mentioned were part of that, and the additional one was the shared success part of it, where we went back and talked to everyone saying, not just look at one thing, look at the agility part, look at the innovation part, look at being truly human, working with individuals as individuals and not as groups of people. There were 5 of these DNAs that we worked very, very closely with. And I think Manvi did, coming back to your question, I think Manvi, we talked about this. I think it's important to help people understand how to learn better. And we did a workshop which was learning how to learn, and it was like a half an hour thing, and we went back and started talking to our people and saying, what is the right way of learning, what are some of the key focus areas, and how do you ensure that you are addressing that that part of it is what was important. Not just looking at from an organizational perspective, not just looking at what content you have and how do you fit that in, but keeping the learner and the employee in the center of everything else that's happening around, and then bringing all of it together to our people. I think that's what's important. And all of you who are learning professionals on the call, go back and look at that as an opportunity to put the learner in the center and say, if you were a learner, how would you want this to happen? If you are a learner, how would you want to learn? And then go back and start planning everything around that. Do you think something like this would be required only for about 10 minutes, or do you think you would need an 8-hour session? Go back and start working on it. And I think that is what will help you be successful and will get your table on the seat on the table. Unless you don't get the seat on the table, and I've said this in many other conversations, as a learning professional, if you don't get seat on the table, then we can sit in these conferences and talk about what we can do, but we may not be successful. I think that's going to be extremely critical piece.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bhupender, and thank you for bringing that 6th element of shared success as an organization to the list as well, and bringing your perspective. So I'm going to take on Monisha's question. Tanya and Prabir, I'm bringing that to you. A very interesting question saying, what are some of the mindfulness practice or daily steps? We're trying to see how we can apply that self-awareness to ourselves individually. What would you recommend to help us build self-awareness, self-leadership? It'll be great to hear from both of you. Prabir first, and
And
then
you go ahead, whichever.
or Tanya first, and then Prabir. Your choice.
Sure, I can start. That's a great question, and I'm interested to hear what other people would say to that too. I'll just share a few questions that I ask myself when I have a goal or when I want to learn something. And the first question is, what do I already know about this topic or about this goal? What's my starting point? Am I starting at the beginning? Am I starting partway along? Where am I on that journey? What do I already know? Then the next question is a little bit uncomfortable, but I ask myself, what is most likely to throw me off course? What is the most likely obstacle that would stop me from achieving this goal or learning what needs to be learned? Sometimes it's I have a fear. Sometimes it's I don't have the time, or sometimes that's not a priority, or sometimes I think I don't have the resources, or I don't know what the next step is. So it could be all kinds of things. But what is the thing that's going to get in my way? And that's a little uncomfortable because you have to think about not achieving the goal or not learning the thing. But when I make myself do that, then I get to the third question, which is, how am I going to overcome that obstacle? So what resources do I have, or what do I need to go and get or find out to let me overcome my obstacle? Because once I've done that, and it takes a bit, it's not something that I just can think of and solve in a moment, but I have to really think about it, and I have to go and gather that information or gather that resource or support. But once I've done that, then I know where to start, I know where I'm going, I know what my biggest challenge is going to be, and I know how I'm going to overcome it. So then the fourth question is, so what's my first step? What am I going to do? And I've just found that helps me understand why I get stuck, push myself through that, and really bring awareness. I call it activating awareness. That's my term for it, activating awareness for performance, for a goal. So that's my step.
So I'll add to what
Go ahead,
Tanya just
Praveen.
said. Very, very, very sharp three thoughts. One is, I believe that a lot of mindfulness should start from first asking, do I need to sharpen the axe? Because often the axe is irrelevant. So even if you sharpen the axe, it makes no difference. So are you doing what really makes sense? And unfortunately, we never really bring our whole conscience to doing that. Everyone is doing it. Everyone had done it, so I'll do it. So first thing is check for that. Second, that I think is very important is I like the approach of, focus, pause, focus. Many a time we either are forcing ourselves to focus and focus for an infinite time, which is impossible to do. So I like to say, I'm going to focus, I'm going to take my mind away, I'm again going to come back, right? So I think that's very important, needs a lot of self-discipline. But when you are in the moment on a situation, then you are focused, and then you take yourself away because mind by default wanders. And the third, which I think, at least helps me, is the resolve to say, nothing is final. Many a time we get very positioned and tethered to a point of view, because I'd said it 2 days ago or 2 quarters ago. The world is changing. It is okay to say, I've changed my view. It is okay to say I have, and that brings both openness and a refocus, to the moment when you're looking at a problem afresh. Otherwise, we are always tethered. Our past is guiding our current, and therefore somewhere worsening our future. So these are 3 suggestions I would leave.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Praveen. And we are just left with 4 minutes. And I'm going to try to push it 1 minute each. Closing advice that you want to leave with us. Maybe one thing to start, one thing to stop from each one of you. And there's a question from Samariti that was saying, what is it that we could do to make sure that this path is continuous? How can we make it sustainable? So maybe instead of one thing to start, one thing to stop, but we may not have time to hear all of you, but just one thing you want to leave with us to make this journey of investing in self-leadership a continuous one and a intentional one. What will be the one thing you want to leave us with today?
If I have to leave that one thought, I'll say, practice give and take. Learn to give and feel it okay to ask. You don't lose a reputation or an image if you're seeking something. So give and take, literally.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Praveen.
Let me just say, and just to,
Yes.
Praveen, raise your hand if you need help. Don't hesitate to understand the boundaries of your work time. Being at home at times, one kind of, the boundaries get blurred and one doesn't know when to start and when to stop. Get your schedule in place, get your timings in place, and manage that much more effectively, because that's important for, you need to be self-aware, and there are multiple people back home who are waiting for you to get off the screens and spend time with them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Movinder. Yes, Manabi.
So yeah, so I'd just like to add on. Some people have asked that, how do we practice self-leadership? So for people working in organizations, I think you should understand what is your role or purpose in the organization. Okay, once you have that clear, be responsible to that role or purpose, have integrity to that purpose, accountability to that purpose, and also don't believe that self-leadership is self-oriented. Enable self-leadership in others. That is very, very important. And you should make self-leaders in your teams so that people are able to move ahead and take the benefits of this self leadership, which is coming out as a very, very strong culture. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Manavi. Meenakshi, what will be your one thing for today?
I would say just bringing this all together, it's about ownership. It's not about, hey, what can I do for myself? Of course, that's critical and important, but it's more about what can I do for myself, my team, my business? Is it aligned with what I'm here to do? Pretty much a lot of things that I've heard Prabir and Mukhinder and Manavi also speak about it, a very high level of ownership. If we take care of that and focus on what my business is here to do, what my team is here to do, I think everything comes together. It's easier said than done because it's a very tough conversation to have with your own self. But once we do this, employees will see a lot more regard from their team members, from their managers, from the team, because you stop talking about me, but we stop talking about we. And I think that's critical.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Meenakshi. And Tanya, your final closing
Yes,
word of
just
advice.
to build a bit on what Manavi and Meenakshi just talked about, and the purpose of having a clear vision and a clear direction. Just a reminder that awareness and self-awareness is not just for awareness sake, it's awareness for a purpose, awareness for performance. And so when an organization has a clear vision and then an individual increases their own self-awareness and brings other people to increase their awareness as well for the purpose of helping bring about that vision of the organization, then the individual, team, and organizational performance will also increase.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's maybe that final, Tanya, your final point about self-leadership, self-awareness for a purpose, I think summarizes a lot of what we discussed today. And it was great not only to understand the concepts a lot clearer, but also to go deeper into how we may accelerate that cultural change internally and enable each one of our individuals to flourish within the organization. So thank you so much, Manavi, Meenakshi, Tanya, Bhupinder, Prabir, for being with us today. Really, really thank you very, very much. And thanks all of you for joining us as well. Thank you and have a fantastic day ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day ahead.